Thanks for that, Rahul. Incredibly poignant thoughts, really, as we kickstart day three and asking the question, redo cybersecurity or redefine cybersecurity? Well, for those of you just plugging in, here we are. This is day three of the Enterprise Innovation Summit presented by Yota, and our gold partners being Commvault, HP Enterprise Unique Solutions, Infoblox, Tata Communications, Veeam, Versec, the Uptime Institute, and Zoom. We have a global keynote coming up next. Sadin, the lead advisor at Via Group Partners, is in conversation with Sarbjeet, Johal, cloud consultant, about innovations in cyber resilience, safeguarding the next normal. Let's listen in.
Good afternoon. Thanks, Ashwin, for the introduction. This is day three of this event. On day one, we talked about infrastructure. Day two was experience economy. Day three is the cybersecurity innovation happening in the cybersecurity and how that will enable further innovation. That also touches upon the data security side of things. With that said, I am privileged to introduce a good friend of mine and a great leader in tech space, Sadin. He is a C-level advisor, and he also advises the board of directors. Wayne is also a certified board director. So with that said, Wayne, thanks for being here. Let's riff on these topics of cybersecurity and data privacy and how it will enable us to invent in the future what we call the new norms or the future norms. Thanks for being here.
Sure, Sarbjeet. Thank you so much for having me. It's always great to talk with you. And the topic you've put on the agenda is a great one. The next normal, not the new normal, the next normal, because we never know what's going to happen after that, is a time when resilience is vital. We have got to be able to respond to uncertainty, because what's happened in the world in the last couple of years, the level of uncertainty has gone way up. The level of comfort we have in the way we've done things has gone way down. And protecting your assets and having a resilient business. And I'll say not just cyber, but the ability to operate your business. Unless you're in the cyber business, you really want to make a product or sell a product or deliver a product. We've got to be able to do that in the face of increasing uncertainty.
Yeah, with that said, you have more than 3 decades of experience in this industry. Just put that into perspective, where we have been in, and please explain us where we are, the state of cybersecurity and data privacy, and where we are headed at high level, and then we can jump into some of the verticals and how they're handling some of the situations.
So I think Sarbjeet just called me old, and he's right. I've been doing this since mainframes were the only game in town. And so think back 20, 30, even 40 and 50 years ago, there was a mainframe that you spent millions of dollars on, and you put it in a specially designed building, and you put all sorts of physical security around that. And then you connected a whole bunch of dumb terminals to that, often with lease lines. So your security was nobody could get into the thing. It was right in the middle of your building. Everything was internal. If you had a campus, you might have strung your own wires. If not, you had a lease line. The telco, the telephone company, provided you a circuit switched network. So when you paid money for a circuit, you knew from one end to the other, that was your circuit. Nobody was on the party line with you. So that was the state of security many years ago. It was just hard to get into this thing. Now, what's happened? Over the last 20 years, we've moved from these systems of record stored in mainframes through the mini computer revolution, through the client server revolution, and now, of course, to the cloud revolution. And what does that mean? It means the line we drew around our company, this is the perimeter, everything inside was good, everything outside was evil, has fallen apart. The center of our network used to be the mainframe in the basement of some building that we owned. Now the center of the network is this thing. It's the phone in our hand. It's the IoT device. It's the manufacturing center. It's the truck that's delivering our products. And so we have to change the notion of inside and outside. That goes away. The notion has to be trusted and untrusted. safe and less safe. Because I'll quote John Chambers from Cisco. There are two kinds of companies in the world: those that have been hacked and those that don't know they've been hacked. So I will never say safe. I will
Yeah.
always say less dangerous. And that's what we all have to be thinking about these days.
Yeah, I always say this, and after studying it like time and again and learning from folks like you and other leaders in tech, that security is a sort of relative term, and it's like more security is like more like a risk management sort of paradigm. It's like we're never fully secure, right? But we want to be most secure, right? So the one problem or one complaint our industry pundits have conveyed all along is that security is an afterthought when we were building systems, software systems especially. Security is an afterthought. And I am guilty of doing that when I was a developer, and for a long time I did that. So the security was always like tack on, like let's put that security burden on more like operations, not on developers. So things have shifted with DevOps, introduction to DevOps, and other disciplines. If you can shed some light on that, like how the change in the change brought in by the convergence of technologies and convergence of other ideas like agile and DevOps, how has that impacted us, and how the new culture is emerging? Like where I hear you talk many times about the communication between different entities is super important these days as compared to in the past we were siloed.
So you raised a couple of points. The first one is security as a relative risk problem. So when we think about security, a couple of things come to mind. The first one is we're never absolutely secure, and infinite security costs infinite money, so we're never going to do it.
Sure.
So what you try to do is use what's called the fundamental risk equation. The amount of risk you have is the cost of an event times the probability of that event occurring. That's your expected value of risk. So what you start with is inherent risk in a system. This is the risk of the system as it exists today. So you say there's 1 chance in 10 of being hacked, and if we're hacked, it's $1 million. That's $100,000 expected value. And then you go to your C-suite or your board or your auditor or your regulator and say, what is an acceptable number? Perhaps you go to your insurance company and say, what will you cover? So let's say they'll only cover $10,000. You have a $100,000 inherent risk. Your insurance carrier will only cover $10,000. So you've got to figure out a way to handle that other 90.
Yeah.
So we're always building a model of probability and severity, and we put in a mitigation, that is something we're going to spend money on to reduce either the frequency or the severity. And then we balance that against what's acceptable to our C-suite, our board, our regulator, our insurance company. So don't think of security as either or. Don't think security is perfect or broken. Think about how much risk you, the internal company, are willing to accept, and then how you lay off risk onto trading partners, for example, insurance companies. So that's a factor that people don't think about.
Yeah.
If I've got insurance, then I am paying them to take some risk for me. And that's what a premium is. The premium is what you pay the insurance company to handle the probability of risk, whether it's storm insurance or theft insurance or cybersecurity insurance. So that's the first thing to think about. You've got to start with an agreement between your IT department, your security department, maybe your compliance or regulator or audit department, and your C-suite and board. How much risk is enough? How much risk is too much? How much risk can we afford to mitigate? So let's start with that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you asked a question about how we organize and structure. When I was a CIO, I used to joke with my staff that the auditors will eventually find out anyway if we cut a corner, take a shortcut. So let's bring them into the beginning of the process. Even before we had the modern software world, forward-thinking organizations, and I was in banking for decades, put security at the front. We've got to start with, if people steal our money, we're not going to be a bank very long. Yeah. So in some industries, they've known this for decades. And I'll say, Sarbjeet, the typical IT shop today has this operations department and this development department, right?
Yeah.
And now we're going to put them together and call it DevOps. And most IT shops, they don't want to admit it. They face a lot of pushback. Here's why. I have a head of development making $1 million a year. I have a head of operations making $1 million a year. Now I form a DevOps department. Guess what? One of them doesn't have a job anymore or has a different job. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of internal IT pushback. So what I tell my clients is, if you're going to turn the IT department upside down already, put security into the mix and don't do DevOps, go right to DevSecOps.
Yeah.
Have your security people in specifying the design, have your security people in specifying the testing, right? Here's what I want to protect against. Here's the test that will tell me I've protected against that. Test-driven design, for example. I will design to pass this test, and that's how I think security is often done. And then you build it so that it passes the test. And then if the test was designed right, that's security's job, you've got a system that is relatively secure. Not provably secure, not absolutely secure, because there are no such things that I know of in commercial software, but a system that is relatively secure and secure from the beginning, not something that we add around the product that we built. And so it's a cultural thing. It starts at the board level, it starts at the C-suite level, that security matters, that protecting our data, protecting our customers' data, protecting whatever kinds of data have to be protected by regulation, custom, or law are all part of the design. And if we accept that from the top down, then we will build an organization that thinks security matters. And from there, it's just how we implement.
Yeah, I think the when you mentioned the insurance, how we can, I know for sure that not all verticals operate in that manner. I know financial companies do, because I work with bigger banks and all that stuff. So they have insurance on the back end, and insurers actually look at your systems and then assess the risk to your business by auditing your systems. They do that in big companies. But in many other verticals, they don't have similar facilities. So what I heard from you is that having that mindset, even though your vertical may not have those arrangements, having that insurance mindset actually helps you formulate the policy around security, and then helps you sell that sort of idea to your board. Did I get that right?
Well, yeah, I think you did. Look, I've been in financial services, I've been in logistics, I've been in manufacturing, I've been in healthcare, I've been in a number of industries.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Some pay more attention to security than others.
Yeah.
In some cases, it's regulation or law.
Yeah.
In other cases, it's common sense. But obviously, if you're going to go to jail for violating HIPAA, you're going to be really sensitive to that in the healthcare industry.
Yeah.
If it's a matter of somebody stealing a trade secret, the only one that loses is you, the company. So you might have a different opinion about the value of those things.
Yeah.
But when you're looking at security, I don't care what industry you're in, you can go buy insurance. If you don't buy insurance, you're essentially self-insuring. Every business, again, following the fundamental risk equation, says inherent risk minus mitigation equals residual risk. If your company has a culture of risk management, put cybersecurity to the side. If I'm building a factory, if I'm building a supply chain, if I'm building an accounts receivable organization, what's the risk somebody won't pay me? What's the risk the truck will break down and I'll miss a delivery? What's the risk that my refrigerated warehouse will heat up and my seafood will spoil? Yeah. So we all live in the world of risk management, of uncertainty. And if you think of cybersecurity, and a lot of companies do this, they have a risk group over here and then cybersecurity over there.
There, yeah.
We got to stop thinking about IT as this other thing over here. Risk is risk.
Yeah.
There's the risk that my machine breaks down. There's the risk that my ERP system doesn't work. How are they different? They're not. So let's start talking about frequency times severity equals inherent risk minus mitigation, insurance or not.
Yeah.
Maybe paying somebody else. If I go to a third-party company and they do some of my data processing, maybe the contract with them says they will indemnify me against any losses in their shop. In the old service bureau environment, that was not uncommon. Today with cloud, it's somewhat less common. But I could go to, EDS in the old days or IBM, and they would take the risk as part of the payment, depending on my contract.
Yeah.
So don't think about I got to do it alone. I got to get an insurance company. As a CIO, as a CFO, as a head of audit or security or risk, you're balancing cost on the one hand, and then how you solve the problem with money on the other hand. And then it all comes down to, this is what I think the company can live with. If you have a ransomware program, your program may be, I will pay the ransom in Bitcoin. The FBI in the US doesn't think that's a great idea. It may not look so good publicly, but that could be your mitigation strategy. My mitigation strategy is I'm going to pay the ransom. Not the one I would recommend, but certainly one you could adopt and even sell to your board. I'm going to spend X number of dollars. If this happens, the chances are 1 in 100. So it's the amount of money I'll spend divided by 100 is my expected value. Perfectly fine. I think the key, Sarbjeet, is if your IT people are in the corner and not talking to the business people and not talking to the C-suite executives, you're going to create a mismatch. If the business doesn't realize there's a risk because you didn't tell them, shame on you, IT person. And if you tell the business and they take no action, shame on them. And that's why, by the way, having a board of directors that has somebody with some digital smarts. You and I talked before the program about the qualified technology expert designation. That's talking about having somebody on the board that has some knowledge of the questions to ask management, IT management, business management, and also understands the answer. So if the answer is the risk, it can't happen ever. If I was a board member, I'd say, come on, of course it can. If you have a shop where they choose not to encrypt personal data like an insurance company did in the US, if you have a company where they take their cash register systems and connect it to their accounts payable system in their service department, like Target did, you wind up with questions that should be answered one way and either were never asked or were answered badly. And the board didn't say, hang on a minute, that's not okay. So Sarbjeet, it comes down to a dialogue. It comes down to having a conversation about risk, not about IT speeds and feeds.
Yeah, I think those are great sort of words of wisdom for all the folks who are attending this conference. I mean, that's deep knowledge in my view. That's operational knowledge. So now we have covered the sort of more the operation side of things, if you will. Let's pivot our discussion a little bit to the latest developments in this sort of sphere, which is the introduction of cloud for the last 10, 12 years. Gradually, it's getting more and more cloud, more cloud, more cloud. So we went from VMs to, now we are talking about the containers, and then we went to serverless. So in that new world, where we will be having a lot more IoT devices out there in the field, and now on the other end is serverless. It's easy to write a lot of code, microservices, they're spread across everywhere. So what I'm trying to say is, like, our threat surfaces are large and things are not well contained. Like, it's all relative. Like, things were very well contained in the mainframe era, but today they are spread all over the place because computing is pervasive, it's everywhere. So there's a talk about zero trust and a bunch of companies getting funding, big amount of fundings for zero trust kind of solutions. Shed some light on that sort of new breed of technologies coming into the picture without mentioning the vendors and or tools. I understand that, like, just at the idea level. And then we'll jump into, like, what are the opportunities for the future leaders in this space, people who are watching us. Some of them are launching companies in this space, and how they can invent in this area. So two questions.
First of all, I'll say that if I had any insight into what to invest in, I'd be rich and we wouldn't be talking. I'd be on my private island. So just take me as a working IT person.
Exactly.
The first point you made was computing has become much more pervasive. In the old days, we had IT systems. If you hacked the system, if there was an error, maybe we cut somebody's paycheck incorrectly, or maybe we didn't ship an order completely. If my computer is affecting your heart surgery, or your X-ray machine or your nuclear reactor or your rocket ship, and we screw up the OT, the operational technology, people die.
Yeah.
So everybody doing security had better put their thinking cap on and say, if I'm working in the IoT space, the requirement for good security and good integrity, not just security that somebody's going to hack us, but that the system has to be highly available and highly resilient. Resilient meaning if something fails, it can continue to operate. So let's think about that for a minute.
Mm-hmm.
I've got to build a much different environment when my systems are controlling physical devices, because the risk of injury or death or major destruction goes up very dramatically. So let's start with that. Having said that, the latest developments in security, we could talk about all sorts of cool stuff. We're getting many more data points. So, okay, AI and ML, great. But let's take it back a step. Most security breaches that occur not because somebody had some really clever algorithm that evaded everybody. It was because companies didn't do the basics correctly. So we could talk cool stuff all day, but let's start with, how about keeping your systems patched? Hygiene. If you've listened to the CISO at Microsoft, they talk about hygiene all the time. If Microsoft or Google or whoever puts out a patch, don't wait 4 months to apply it to your system. So that's the first thing. These are the basics. There's the old joke, right? The two people are running from the bear, and one person stops to put on his running shoes, and the other person says, "You're never going to outrun a bear even with better shoes." He says, "I don't have to outrun the bear. I just have to outrun you." Most attacks, Sarbjeet, are not directed attacks.
Yeah.
Most companies that get hacked. Now, if you are a nation state, if you are a government contractor, that's a separate conversation. If the North Koreans want to come take your systems, that's a different conversation. But the normal company that gets ransomware and winds up with a $250,000 ransom was not targeted. Somebody bought a kit and ran it across the internet and tried all the doors in your hotel.
Yeah.
And when they rattled the doorknob, the one that opened, they broke in and hoped you had something worth stealing. So be a harder target than everybody around you. Be the one they say it isn't worth it to go get whatever they got. I'm going to go focus on the easy targets. So when I talk to clients, I start with, you need robust prevention. I have a little 6-step process. I'll go quickly through them.
Mm-hmm.
Number 1 is robust prevention. Keep most attackers out. Number 2, once they get in, detect them quickly. The average dwell time, the time that a evildoer gets in your system and moves around in it before you find them, is like 140 days. In 140 days, they can do all sorts of horrible things. So detect them quickly. And that's where the AI and the ML and the pattern matching comes in. If I've got a system that every Tuesday shuts down, and this Tuesday it's very busy, that may be a problem. So let the computer help me identify unusual patterns so I can get quick detection. The third one is defense in depth. I'll cite the Target problem. Target was hacked because the people fixing their chiller, the thing that they kept the cold milk in,
HVAC,
submitted a bill, and the bill came in, and the billing system was connected through Target's network to the cash registers, to the card swipes. So defense in depth means put up a barrier. Don't connect a system with high security to systems with lower security. Then you want to keep your secrets secret. There's an insurance company that was hacked, and they had 81 million patient records unencrypted. And as they said to the Wall Street Journal, encrypting would have been inconvenient. I'm sorry, they leaked 81 million unencrypted records because encryption would have been inconvenient. Which leads me to another question. How old are your systems? What's your technical debt?
Yeah.
The problem in that company, I believe, was that their disk drives were so old that encryption would have put a painful penalty. A modern disk drive has the encryption in the hardware. Theirs had it on software, so you had 10 or 100 times slower. So invest in systems that are current. The next one is Now is where you need to have a plan to get experts in. If you get hacked and you find it quick and they've not gotten your crown jewels and encrypted your payroll system, get some experts. Have somebody on call that you can bring in, and they'll come and help you with the specialized tools that these vendors have. And then the last thing, especially for ransomware, is don't keep all your eggs in one basket. Don't say the only copy I have is here. Yeah. Have a backup. Have a backup on tape. Have a backup to hard drive. Have a backup in the cloud. So 6 steps, no technical discussion, whatever. You can tell your board this, you can tell your management group, you can tell your regulators this, and you can keep your company relatively protected. And Sarbjeet, whether you have your own data center, whether you've got a colo, or you're in the cloud, if you follow these rules, you will be able to protect your company. A quick comment on the cloud. Companies assume, well, I'm in the cloud, they'll protect me.
Yeah.
There's a famous case, I won't name names, where a major bank was in Amazon, and a former Amazon employee hacked into this bank's records and released them on the internet. And the bank complained, how dare you have a hole that somebody can get to? And they said, well, former employee. Nonsense. It was a well-documented gateway to get analytic data out. And then they didn't protect their servers against requests coming in the zero trust sense. Why would a network mapping server ever want to see the file names? It shouldn't.
Yeah.
So they were hacked because they didn't follow the basics of cyber hygiene, because they said, well, we thought Amazon would protect us. I tell clients a lot, Sarbjeet, you probably heard me say this, outsource your hardware, outsource your software, but don't outsource your brains. You can't say they're taking care of it for me. If you're the CIO, if you're the CISO, you own the responsibility for making sure that every one of your vendors is doing what they're supposed to.
Yeah, having worked with 2 cloud providers myself, I can attest that a lot of people have this misconception about the security side of things, that they think if I put this in cloud, most of the security responsibility falls onto the cloud provider, which is not true. Actually, almost none of the security responsibility falls on the cloud provider. It's you. You have to harden your systems. You have to make sure you're doing network slicing of different workloads. You have to make sure that your operating systems are patched. So they will not take that responsibility. In the olden times, we used to have this abbreviation, RTFM. I will not say the full form because I can't. And now that RTFM is FSLA. So read the FSLA. So that is the new term. I always say that because we are moving into the new norms now. So you have to read your SLAs to find out like who is responsible for what. So with that said,
by the way, Sarbjeet, RTFM stands for read the full manual.
Okay, got it. I think the viewers will Google it and then find out what the actual meaning is. So it's a slang here. We used it all for last 3-4 decades. Yeah. With that said, I think any departing comments, remarks. We didn't like. I want to cover a little bit about the investment going into this zero trust sort of startups. I think it's a welcome step. Personally, I believe. Because of the new norm or the next norm, that our workforce is distributed, attack surfaces are bigger. So I think having that kind of policy, I think will do us a lot of good. And of course, like people side of things as well, right? So like most of the hacks happen because of people make mistakes, right? Not machines are not making mistakes, it's people, right? So they forgot to patch the system. They had weaker passwords and they clicked on a link in an email. So that side is always there. We understand that. But just a few last words and a few comments on the zero trust. Sort of a lot of talk out there.
Yeah, zero trust is the concept that says we're not going to control that device A, when they connect to device B, can do anything the 2 devices want.
Yeah.
Zero trust is a more granular approach that says Sarbjeet, because of his job, because of his geography, because of the time of day, because of the system he wants to access, is allowed to see those columns and those rows of that table and nothing else. And Wayne, because he has a different job, or because he's from a different country, or because he has a different need for that data, can see different columns and different rows. The problem with prior levels of security is we assumed an inside and an outside. If you're inside, well, we can share whatever you want. If you're outside, we can share nothing. And the world has gotten a lot more complicated. So all zero trust is, and forget all the technical jargon around it, is saying, I know why you need access, not just what you need access to. So we'll talk about role-based security in your role, in your title, in your country, in your business unit. This is what you should see. Yeah. And the security then becomes much more granular, and we don't let you see anything except stuff you're allowed to see. The prior default was, hey, Sarbjeet, you can access that server. That server is now your private playground. If you think about security that way, it's a terrible idea. We're not asking you why you need it. We're not assigning it to you based on a role. We're just giving it to you because it's a thing. And so we've got to get around that notion. So zero trust is the assumption that everything is based on why you need access, and we'll grant it based on who you are and what you're doing. And it makes a lot of sense because I can control things anywhere. The notion of a firewall. Again, a firewall and a VPN. I come through this thing, and all of a sudden I'm authenticated.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, you got to be thinking about cloud access brokers. My phone can reach 500. I got 489 applications installed on this physical phone. Those are probably on 575 servers in 400 data centers around the world. Who knows what those things are? And if I'm in a company, about 50 or 100 of them are on different client machines. So what kind of security can we possibly put onto somebody who's going to reach hundreds of endpoints? And the answer is we need to get away from firewalls and have to configure them company by company and start talking about from this device to the world. I'm going to get to it through the cloud, whatever that means to you and your company. And I'm going to put in the protection that says this device, because again, Wayne logged in, can do that on this server over here. And by the way, if I move the server from here to there, the access rights should go with the application, not with the physical location of the machine. Yeah. So it's a whole rethinking of security around the Great Wall of China, the Maginot Line in France was said, we'll put up a wall and nobody can get through it. And you know what happened? They went around it.
Yeah.
And that's what we've got to develop is a defense in depth and a defense that adjusts to the attack based on why I need it. And that's where we're going. And I say, when I talk to executives, the two most important words in cybersecurity are zero and trust. And if your cyber people are not telling you what they're doing about that concept, they are not paying attention to the future of cybersecurity.
I think it's well said. And if you folks who are listening haven't brushed upon the zero trust mechanism, where the device has its own identity, a person has their own identity, and there are geo coordinates for the person, for the device, for other constructs in your system, whatever they happen to be, IoT devices and or sensors. So they all have their identity, and based upon that, the amalgamation of factors, you will access them the rights to data, application, and files, and so forth. So with that said, Wayne, thank you very much for joining us today. Thanks to all the listeners who are here listening, and please contact Wayne if you have any further questions. And he's pretty approachable, but be cognizant of his time, and he may take some time to get back to you. But he's on Twitter. We'll put the handle on here. And with that, thanks, Wayne. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Sarbjeet. It was a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you.